afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Marcus, for the kind introduction. I hope earlier you enjoyed the panel discussion about acquisition. I believe that is more exciting than what I'm going to share with you now. I'll try to keep the topic interesting so that you can stay awake. All right, quickly, let's get everything in order. I think Marcus has done the introduction. I'll skip that part about myself. I'll talk a bit more about the company. I'm from an organization called LogiSYM, currently serving in GATS itself. And for LogiSYM, we have been around for more than 30 years now. The whole company started off in the world's first single window, which is called a trade net in Singapore. And since then, we have expanded that whole know-how to many other developing countries. And around 6 years ago, we decided to set up GATS. And the reason why we set up GATS is really what we realized is when we help the country to digitalize the whole import-export process, everything is all good. To become more efficient, to become more transparent. But what we realized that when there's a cross-border trade that goes on between the buyer and seller in different countries, especially involving some of the freight forwarder, there's a tendency of going back to paper and manual process. And then we say that, hey, that defeats the whole purpose of digitalizing the administrative process in the country, but yet the whole cross-border trade going back to non-digital format. And that helped us to set up GATS. And really, in GATS, I think our focus is really about providing a platform to facilitate global trade. And our shareholder for LogiSYM is majority owned by PSA, which is a major port operator, and also the minority owned by Enterprise Singapore, who promotes trade for Singapore companies. So within LogiSYM and GATS, we focus on 4 key areas. In the area of digital port, that really which is very important in terms of the gateway for the physical goods to come into the country. Thereafter, we look at digital government on what are some of the public administration that we can use technology to help to improve. And on the third area, we are looking at trade compliance. This is one area of specialty. But what we want to focus on is really how we actually help to simplify the whole trade compliance process. And we'll talk more about it later. And the last part of it is really looking at how technology can be applied in the logistics area. So, touch a bit quickly. I think these are information that you are fully aware. I think during the whole last 2 years, there were many topics that talks about disruption to supply chain. And other than the pandemic that we have just been through, which some countries are still facing it, in the case of China, we also face with other challenges as well. For example, geopolitical conflicts, and currently there's war going on. And I think we are also constantly faced with trade war. I mean, during the Trump administration, you can see that he decided to make changes on the whole bilateral agreement or imposing new tariff or any dumping duties, and which we are seeing that some of these practices is going to be quite frequent, especially where countries want to protect their own industry and their own economy as well. If we dive deeper into specifically on compliance, what are really some of the challenges that many businesses face when it comes to compliance is really in the area of their knowledge, their understanding of trade compliance itself. Because if you really think about trade compliance, it's not a very natural thing. This is something that involves a government agency. When you want to move the goods, you just want to put it on the ship or on the plane, ship it across to the other side. But because of all these regulatory requirements that government imposed, from custom, to food agency, or to other controlling agency, it is important that you are familiar with the trade compliance requirement, because the last thing you want is put all your goods into a container, ship it across, and you cannot import into the country. And many times, some of the area why they have challenges in trade compliance is really the lack of in-house expertise. While you can outsource the actual operation process to service provider, by the end of the day, when it comes to trade compliance, the government actually hold the importer exporter responsible for the actual shipment itself. Most of the time, the third party, the logistics player, are just facilitating the movement. But if there's anything wrong with the goods, they are not going to go after your customs worker, they are not going to go after your trade border, but they're going to go after the importer and exporter themselves. So it's still important that we must have certain level of trade compliance expertise within our organization. What we want to do is to make sure that the product that we manufacture, it can enter into a market easily. And of course, many things that impact a trader or manufacturer is whether you want to get a preferential duty treatment, for the goods that are trying to sell to the market, so that it can become competitive. And if you do not know how to classify the goods properly, what happens is that you will end up either paying more duty, or you run into a situation where you under-declare your value, and then you end up in a penalty situation. Of course, when it comes to trade compliance, because it's very incidental, it's at the point of import or point of export. Many organizations actually overlook the importance of digitalizing the trade compliance process. They'll spend huge amount of money in terms of procurement, about PO management. They'll spend money in terms of TMS or WMS because they actually house it. And because trade compliance happens at the point of entry or point of exit, they tend to have little emphasis in terms of how they can digitalize it. But of course, if, like I said earlier, if there's any restriction, any impact, basically it just stop the whole supply chain as well. So I think I've covered some of this point. Why trade compliance is important. End of the day, you want to have the speed of cargo clearance. Maybe in a commercial B2B trade, that speed is still important. But as compared to e-commerce, today consumers have high expectation on e-commerce goods. The moment you place your order, you will like it to be delivered as fast as possible. And if the trade compliance is not done correctly, it can cause huge amount of delays. And that's why I think the speed becomes an important thing. Cost of compliance have many facets. It comes all the way from the actual duty that you have to pay. It can also have implication of penalty if you are not compliant. And end of the day, and when exceptional incident occur, you don't even have a predictable cost to make sure that you can recover your goods. And that is where the cost will build up so much that it's quite common that in cross-border trade, where such situation occur, many of the shippers, they actually even have to abandon their goods just because it is so complex to handle them. Of course, for trade compliance, I think what you want to do is reduce the risk of inspection and cause any delays, because you have made promises to your customer that you want to deliver the goods on time. And you want to make sure that you create that kind of competitiveness. And when it comes to trade compliance, all the rules are set by government and all the different agencies that are involved in the clearance of the goods. And what you need to do is to ensure that you follow certain standards, follow the regulation. Many times they change on a regular basis. For example, in customs, the common language they understand is what we call HS code. And for them, just on HS code alone, every 5 years they actually renew the HS code chapter. And so these are of course constantly changing. And we also have many international bodies. And if you look at supply chain, it's not just one single player. You have the logistics, you have the trucking community, you have the rail, you have the air, you have the ocean. And many of them, each of them will introduce their own standards, catering for that whole particular sector. But if you look at a guy, a shipper who is looking at that, all he wanted was to ship from point A to point B. He wanted to be simplified. But yet, if we have to do multimodal arrangement, suddenly it becomes very complicated. And so it's very important that you have to follow all these standards. If you don't follow all these regulation and standards, basically you're going to have problem in moving your goods to your customer as required. So I'm going to cover how we actually make use of technology to help to improve the whole trade compliance. And for gas and cryptology, we are privileged where we have been working on the government side for the last 30 years, helping many government agencies, many countries to improve their whole trade compliance administration. And we actually have a good understanding from a government perspective, what are the risks that they want to mitigate, what are the processes that have put in place in order for them to do the administrating their regulation properly. And in the last few years, we also have the privilege to work with many businesses, looking at the relationship between the shippers, the logistics service provider, the custom broker, who are all involved with all trade compliance. And we believe that I think we're in the right time to not take an individual business or government perspective, but actually to bring together both of them into the whole system. Like in the case of handling the data, how can we make sure that seamlessly when the buy-sell activity happens, all the way that it's being transformed among the logistics sector, and how the information can be easily comply with the standards required by individual importing or exporting country customs and the other agency, and so that it can seamlessly be processed and eventually it can be stored in the correct manner, especially in trade compliance today. One of the main drivers is all this free trade agreement, and there's a concept of what we call authorized economic operator, where many government is implementing that scheme to certify specific authorized economic provider and give them certain preferential treatment. And so the data actually flow all the way from when sales and purchase happen, and all the way when the goods are physically moved, and even the goods are delivered is not the end of trade compliance. And today, because of the whole AEO program, there's expectation for businesses who do the import to make sure that they keep all their documents in a proper manner, so that they can enjoy their preferential or their facilitated treatments in terms of self-administrating their own governance, so that the customs don't have to stop and inspect most of their goods. So that whole process, we term it as pre, clear, and post, and it doesn't end just when you only got approval at the point of import. So on the solution side, we have come up with two different platforms, but they are well integrated. On the left-hand side, what you can see is a platform that we have created for government to administer their whole import-export procedure, where we provide custom management services from the agency, etc. We also provide the single window system so that all the import-export procedure can be done through a single window, eventually all the free trade agreement. And on the right-hand side is a more business-centric service, and where we look at it from logistic compliance to finance and services. And what we are doing is to make sure that the data flow, there is connectivity between both systems, so that data flow from the moment the purchase order is issued and all the way when the credit is being done. And it's also important that when we do the trade compliance, especially in the supply chain, we cannot just think from a trade compliance point of view. A lot of times we need to think from the other aspect of supply chain, which is logistics and finance. And today, like I say, in the case of finance, I think it's important that what the lender want to do is to make sure that this particular goods that's coming, probably the trader have taken up some financing, and they want to make sure that it has been properly cleared by custom authority, and so that they can actually release the payment to the borrower. At the same time, on the logistic aspect, what we have also seen is that for compliance, the information is an independent trusted source of information. And we have recently done an implementation for a company where they are able to make use of trade compliance information to gather inventory visibility. This use case is for a wine industry where they're shipping from Latin America. And what it does is that because from the moment the ship sets in, and we have all the bill of lading, packing list information, we couple and integrate that with all the import-export procedure. Today, from a logistics service provider and the principal, they can all both access to the same system that they can see at what stage the inventory is, and some of them even for the principal, just before the goods even arrive in Singapore, they can even decide to sell the inventory when required. So, and it's important that when you look at trade compliance, you want to make sure that you have a good digital connectivity with all the different custom systems around the world. End of the day, the last thing that you want is that you generate all your data in your system. You have to print them out in paper and then start handling over paper. So I think for Crimson Logic, we have actually done all the different connectivity with all the different countries, where we allow not only the transformation of the data to a country requirement, it can be securely transmitted through a digital platform like LogiSYM. And to help that whole transformation, we actually look at it in 3 different stages. First of all, if you don't have structured data, we can help you to digitize it. And once you're able to digitize into structured data, what we can do is to transform into a requirement. You will find it very strange in some countries. Some call consignee, some of them call importer, and actually they meant the same thing. So we have that transformation capability to say that, oh, if you're doing a Singapore export to Thailand import, what is the correct value that we have to input, and not just assuming that in Thailand side, they actually use the same nomenclature. And finally, after you transform the data, I mentioned earlier, you have to connect and send the information digitally. So I give you an example. This is one of our use cases where our customer is an express courier company. They are agent of FedEx and TNT. And what we have done is to create that connectivity from their own system. Actually, they get their data from their principal, which is FedEx. And what we are doing is to help to convert their data into the local requirement format. And using that account, we actually help them to submit to the single window system in Saudi Arabia. And in that sense, they reduce the number of human beings that have to be involved. And they also reduce the number of errors they have to face with human data entry. And this offers them the speed, and for express courier company, you know, speed is key. They have to deliver the parcel fast. With this solution that we have provided to them, the data is able to be submitted on time, and they got the customer approval in a very short manner. So this is another use case where we have a company that deal with all kind of furniture related, and the problem that they faced was the control over the import filings that they have. They have a very high operation cost due to non-compliance. And if you understand that furniture can be a sensitive product, and normally furniture attracts a very high duty rate. And if you use some kind of wood that is protected, that have export control at the origin site, and then that becomes a potential for non-compliance, or maybe some countries are very sensitive that they do not want to import furniture that is made of illegal logging. They want to make sure that all the wood that is used have gone through some kind of sustainable logging, and I think these are all the different possibilities that can cause, and once you have non-compliance, you will definitely delay the shipment and delivery of the goods. So we actually provide a self-filing solution. And what we have done is that they have been also been using paper, despite that the paper that they use to exchange with their counterparts are computer generated, but because they feel more secure with paper. So what we have done is to come up with OCR technology to be able to extract the data without them having to do any data entry, and able to populate and transform into the format required for equal export. Quickly, this is some of the accolades that we have received from some of the partners that we work with, like PIL, DBS. And we do work closely with Chamber of Commerce, where we provide an electronic certificate of origin. And I think what is consistent is we take our trade compliance experience, we apply on the different areas, whether it's on data preparation or even creating certificate of origin, electronic certificate of origin for the Chamber of Commerce, and also working with banks to make sure that the information that we have, of course, with the approval from our client, to be able to share with them so that they can actually borrow the money faster. And quickly, this is just some of the awards and certification that we have achieved as a company. And I think that will end my presentation. Sorry, I ran through a bit fast, but I thought it will help if you have questions. I can spend some time on answering some of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Well, we appreciate the presentation. It was very insightful, and trade compliance and compliance in general is a very important topic nowadays. You mentioned it. Nobody wants to be caught by the government or by the customs with the wrong entry and then have to justify the wrong findings. I'm sure questions from the audience. Open to the floor. I have one. Okay. We always talk about digitalization and EDI connectivity. From a Singapore context, they're trying to do that paperless submission. But how do you see the current challenges, or are there any challenges when you say how to get everything on a digital platform of EDI connectivity? How shippers best address these challenges when they want to go on the compliance path?
Okay. Thanks for the question. I think Singapore has started this journey almost 30 years ago, and that was the main reason that we reformed. And you probably find it very interesting that after 30 years, we still have people that actually still deal with data. And our strategy has been very clear from day one, especially when you want to submit all the information to the government, to make sure that everything is digitized. And what we have done, of course, is to provide facility like EDI information. In Singapore, we have even extended the ecosystem to cover what we call value-added service provider, where these are trusted or certified companies that have direct connectivity with the TradeNet system, and they actually facilitate. They even created other functionality that industry require to submit the digital information. And our strategy also not just to look at pure digital, we even have set up service bureau so that we actually help traders. I mean, if you are only doing 1 or 2 trades a month, it probably really doesn't make sense for you to invest any technology. And what we have done is to create a service bureau to help the traders to convert those data into digital format. Of course, I think with the latest technology on OCR and AI, I think that is something that we are deploying right now, where we help to extract as much information as possible for the purpose of trade compliance. Of course, you can use it for other parts of logistics as well.
Question from the audience?
Yeah, hi, thanks. I think digitizing everything is good. But as you are aware of the fact now, there's always that hacking and all sort of thing. So how do you make sure that if somebody really goes digital, and how you ensure the security of the data?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. First of all, it is impossible to eliminate any cybersecurity threat. Today you come out with a new solution, they will hack it and they'll find something else. I think with my little knowledge of cybersecurity, I think there's a few aspects that we look at. Of course, from technology implementation, where you put in some kind of firewall, you do your architecture design correctly to make sure that your system is secure. Of course, we can deploy many different technology, like putting more gates to your house so that it prevents robbers from coming in. At the same time, I think it's also very important that from awareness and knowledge point of view, and if you see, I think in the last couple of years, we have seen more and more announcement of cybersecurity attack, and sometimes it is human-driven, in terms of whether is it people are too casual in sharing the confidentiality in terms of the password, the user ID, and credential. At the same time, I think it's also about internal threat, where we see that maybe the setup wasn't done correctly, or it can be an insider job that costs. So cybersecurity prevention is all-rounded. It is not just that I use the best tool, I will be safe. You need to take care from a policy point of view, from a process, from the people, and of course with the technology it helps. And you constantly have to update this. I think at least for Crimson Logic, we take this very seriously because we are sort of like a custodian. We're independent bodies, we have no vested interest in terms of the trade. And it's very important that we need to make sure that the data is stored securely so that our customers feel comfortable for the data to go through us or even stored in our server itself. And so these are all the different areas that we constantly keep ourselves updated. Touch wood, we haven't caught many attacks, but so far we haven't had any successful attacks.
I have a question. So from a business perspective, right, all this talk of digitalization and all this, and we went through this whole NTP phase. As much as we want to, right, there's still a lot of business needs where talk about physical LCs, physical bill of ladings, switch documents and that kind of thing. I wanted to know from Crimson Logic and what you know of the industry, has there been any talk of any improvements in terms of what the banks will require, what the business will require, and the kind of initiatives in place that would help all this digitalization? Another question that I have is, we do business throughout the whole of Asia, in fact the whole world, but looking more specifically at the Southeast Asia continent, right? And this all this talk previously, the last pre-COVID days of ASEAN single window and all these kind of things, what has happened to that? Has the situation actually been rolled out and improving to a certain extent that we only need one set of documentation for shipment all the way from Singapore to Thailand, for example, or is it still multiple levels of customs declaration, etc.
Okay, I'll try to answer, as when I answer, some of it is my personal perspective. I cannot be saying that I represent the company or the company. I'll answer the second question first. I think first of all, supply chain is a big industry. I mean, today's supply chain is worth around $7 to $8 trillion. And there are multiple parties involved in the whole supply chain. And the good thing is that everybody sees the importance, especially with COVID, they see the importance of investing in technology to help different aspects of supply chain. Of course, with that desire to improve different aspects of supply chain, we also start to create different initiatives that when they are not connected, it becomes a challenge for a trader, where today, when I deal with party A, I have to use this system. When I deal with party B, I have to use a different system. And of course, whatever the government, especially the ASEAN government, has been trying to do in the ASEAN single window, is definitely a very good initiative. But the number of stakeholders that are involved is complicated. I mean, one of the things that they are doing is this called ASEAN single window, which is definitely a good thing. But end of the day, every country is still a sovereign country, and they very much want to make sure that their own country interests and risks are being mitigated. At the same time, they want to facilitate their trade. I would say that compared to 10 years ago, we are in a much better position now. When it comes to ASEAN single window, I think the policy is in place, the vision is there, the systems are also being in place. I think now it's really about getting it, you need to give it time for it to operationalize and smooth out, and also getting participation from the industry themselves. A simple example is certificate of origin. Where you want to send that information, theoretically today we can generate a digital certificate of origin, but it is the other party who receives that digital copy and to feel comfortable and able to trust that copy. So I think on the second question, I think we are seeing more and more convergence, and what many of these initiatives have promised, I think it will be realized soon. I think we are in the operations phase. As compared in the past, we are always in the planning and discussion, and now I think it's really getting the industry people to operationalize it. I think on the digital part, I think it actually goes through the same vein as well. Many companies, if you ask me, at least there is a lot of desire to invest in technology today. We are seeing logistic player investing into technology, trying to do the platform business, and you also see technology company trying to get involved in the whole supply chain fiscal activity. I think these are all good. I think what is important between your first and second question is how can we get connected to each other better, and whether we have we're able to trust each other's system, whether we are able to get more connected, where our information that's processed through our platform can flow into easily to somebody else, a cheaper or manufacturer system. My only reservation is the part when it comes to standard. Today we just have too many different standards, and it's very hard to follow getting everybody to follow one single standard. I mean, you have the banks that will want to see from the banking standard, the logistics side of the own standard they want to follow. But I think what is important is that we will have to respect all these different standards. How do we actually make use of technology platform like Calista, where we can easily convert from one standard to another standard without having too much difficulty, leveraging on AI and machine learning to do many of this automating of this job.
All right, thank you, Mike, for the big answer to the big questions. Yeah, I really appreciate it.